The night it happened, sirens painted our driveway red and blue, flashing through the rain like a warning sent straight from heaven. Grandma's last voicemail looped on my phone, her voice trembling, fragile, and desperate. "They left me, please." "Don't let them sell the house." Every replay felt like a punch to the chest. I stared at her contact name, Grandma May, and for the first time it felt like a gravestone. Inside, the house was chaos disguised as celebration. Boxes stacked in every corner like tombstones, each one labeled with pieces of our lives. Kitchen, books, safe. My parents clinked champagne glasses in front of the glowing refrigerator light. The purchase contract for the house was taped there, fresh ink gleaming under the flicker. "Clean break," Mom said, her voice sharp, almost cheerful. "She won't even remember by morning." "They'll keep her medicated." Dad laughed, low and nervous. Cheers to finally being free. The air felt too still, too wrong. Every family photo had been stripped from the walls, leaving faint dust outlines like ghosts of who we used to be. I wanted to scream that this was theft, betrayal, madness, but all I could do was stand there, clutching my phone like it was a weapon. Then it buzzed. A notification, no name, no text, just a location pin that blinked for a second before vanishing. My stomach dropped. It came from an unknown number, but the timing was too perfect. Something or someone was watching us. I slipped out the back door into the cold drizzle. The neighborhood was silent except for the distant hum of freeway noise. Then I saw it, a black SUV idling across the street, headlights off, rain sliding down its windows like melting glass. My pulse hammered. The driver's door opened, and a tall man in a charcoal coat stepped out. His movements were slow, deliberate, like someone who'd been waiting for this moment. He didn't introduce himself. Didn't smile. He just stood under the streetlight and held up a Polaroid photo. My grandmother, decades younger, her arm around a scrawny kid holding a newspaper bag. The photo was weathered, like it had lived through too many storms. "I owe her my life," he said quietly, his voice deep, calm, but dangerous. "And I know exactly what your parents did tonight." The words hit harder than the rain. "Who are you?" I asked, stepping back instinctively. Before he could answer, a sharp crash echoed from upstairs, shattering glass, heavy footsteps. My bedroom window. My name hissed through the night like a threat. "Eli!" It was my father's voice, furious, slurred, too loud. The man didn't even flinch. "Bring your keys," he said. "If we're 5 minutes late, she disappears." "What are you talking about?" "Your grandmother," he said. "They didn't just sell her house. They sold her freedom." His gaze flicked toward the kitchen window where my parents' shadows moved. They forged more than a signature. "Trust me, kid, you don't want to be here when they find out I'm involved." Before I could ask more, the front doorknob started to turn. The sound froze me in place. My parents were coming back inside. They had gone to the garage to load the safe box, the one they never let me touch. I looked at the stranger, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the rain anymore. He leaned closer, his breath white in the cold air. "They think this sale makes them rich," he whispered. "But what they really sold isn't theirs to sell? What do you mean?" He studied my face for a long second, then said the sentence that detonated my entire life. "Your grandma never owned this house the way you think, and by morning, neither will they." Before I could respond, the front door flew open. Light spilled across the porch as my parents stepped in, laughing, until they saw the open back door. "Eli?" Mom's voice sliced through the silence. "What are you doing out there?" The man grabbed my wrist. "Choose right now," he said. "If you stay, she's gone forever. If you come, you might still save her." Something in his eyes, an urgency, a promise, or maybe guilt, made my choice for me. I ran. We sprinted across the slick pavement, shoes splashing through puddles. Behind us, Mom screamed my name, her voice cracking. Dad shouted something about calling the cops. But it didn't sound like a father's panic. It sounded like fear of exposure. The SUV's door slammed shut behind me, and the man floored it. Tires screeched. The world blurred into streaks of wet color. Through the rear window, I saw my parents standing in the doorway, drenched in red-blue police reflections from the street. For the first time, I realized those sirens weren't coming for me. They were coming for them. The stranger handed me a folded envelope. "Don't open it until I tell you," he said. And don't trust anyone with your last name. I stared at him, words strangled in my throat. Who are you? His jaw tightened. Someone she once saved, he said. And now, it's time to pay the debt. As the SUV disappeared into the highway, the last thing I saw in the side mirror was my father, holding the safe box, his face twisted in rage and terror. My mother reached for his hand, but he shook her off. Something between them was already breaking. The man beside me checked his watch, muttering, "If the wire clears by 9 a.m., it's over." Wire? I echoed, heart pounding. He looked at me, rainwater glistening on his face. A wire transfer. Your parents are selling more than a home, Eli. They're selling proof. Proof that could destroy them, or save her. Outside, thunder rolled like an omen. Inside the car, the air felt heavy with secrets older than I was. And somewhere in that storm, I knew. Nothing about my family was ever real. The wipers beat like a heartbeat as we tore through sleeping cul-de-sacs, sprinklers hissing across perfect lawns. The man drove fast, but with the composure of someone who had lived through worse storms. The SUV's headlights sliced through fog, and every streetlight flickered past like a countdown. He didn't say a word for miles, just breathed slow and even, like he already knew how this night would end. Finally, he spoke. I'm Mason Hawthorne, he said, his tone clipped, professional. Tech investor now. But once I delivered newspapers door to door. That's when your grandmother found me. He handed me a creased photograph from the console, Grandma May, younger, smiling through a dust storm of time. Beside her stood a skinny boy, ribs visible through his shirt, one eye swollen. Mason. Your grandmother hid me when my stepfather broke my ribs, he said. She fed me canned beans and soup for a week. Wrote one sentence on a napkin before I left. When you escape, help someone who can't. He swallowed hard. I kept that napkin for 40 years. Built my first company with that note taped inside the drawer. The story hit like a slow knife. Grandma, quiet, gentle grandma, had saved a stranger decades ago. And now he was back, driving through the night like a ghost repaying a debt. Mason reached into the glove box and pulled out a thick brown folder. Dropping it in my lap. Read. Inside were photocopies, signatures, property transfer forms, and wire details stamped with dates. Today's date. Your parents moved your grandmother across state lines, he said. To a care home that doesn't exist on any license registry. It's a shell. They used a forged power of attorney to sell her house to a developer. Elder exploitation. Wire fraud. If that transfer clears at 9 a.m., the title is gone, and so is she. The words felt unreal. My parents committing crimes? Against their own mother? You're saying they kidnapped her? I whispered. Mason's eyes stayed on the road. No, they trafficked her for her property. The world spun. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. We have to call the police, he gave a dry laugh. Your parents are the police right now. They've already filed a false report saying you're unstable, that you took her. By sunrise, every cruiser in the county will have your description. The SUV slowed in front of a flickering neon motel sign. Desert Pines Inn. Vacancy. The parking lot was half empty, puddles reflecting red light from a dying exit sign. We parked by room 12. Mason turned off the engine, reached into his coat, and drew out a small silver revolver, not to threaten, but to show he wasn't bluffing about danger. He tucked it into the door pocket. Stay quiet, he said, stepping into the rain. The door to room 12 creaked open, releasing a breath of bleach and something older. Fear, maybe. On the bed sat Grandma May, her gray sweater buttoned unevenly, her hair still pinned from the morning. Her purse was clutched to her chest like a parachute. When she saw me, her eyes sharpened, the fog of sedation lifting for one brief, heartbreaking second. Eli? She said, voice trembling. They told me you were gone. I ran to her. Grandma, what did they do to you? She reached for my hand, her grip frail but fierce. They took my ring, she whispered, and the deed. Said I'd forget soon, but I remember everything. Tears blurred my vision. We're getting you out of here. She looked at Mason. Recognition dawned. The boy, she murmured. You came back, he nodded once. You saved me once. It's my turn. She gave a faint smile, then leaned closer to me. Listen carefully, Eli. The house was never theirs. It's part of the Hawthorne Trust. Your grandfather and Mason's father built it. It can only pass to the next guardian if the family proves mercy, not money. Mason froze. The Hawthorne Trust? He repeated. That's impossible. It was dissolved. Grandma shook her head slowly. No, it sleeps until it's tested. And your father's name? She looked straight at me. Is inside it. I didn't understand. What do you mean inside it? Before she could answer, a noise outside made Mason move toward the window. A shadow slid across the curtain. Tires crunched on wet gravel. The rhythmic beep of a car door alarm echoed faintly. Someone was out there. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Dad, "Where are you?" Then another, "Police are on the way." You're scaring her. Come home now. Mason looked at me, his jaw tightening. He knows we're here. Grandma's hands trembled as she reached into her purse and pulled out a small brass key wrapped in a faded ribbon. She pressed it into my palm. Deposit box, she whispered. Del Rey branch. Before 9. Everything's there, the proof, the names, the clause. You'll understand when you open it. Grandma, we have to go now. She shook her head. If you take me, they'll call it abduction. Take the key. Save what matters. Mason yanked the curtains shut. Headlights flooded the window, bright as a confession. A car door slammed. Another. Boots splashing. Voices. Grandma's eyes met mine, full of urgency and love. Whatever happens next, promise me you'll read the letter inside that box. I promise. The door handle began to rattle violently. Eli! My mother's voice, sharp, rehearsed panic. Please, honey. Don't hurt her! Hurt her! The lie hit like a slap. They were staging everything. Mason drew his gun, nodding toward the bathroom window. Go, now. I grabbed Grandma's purse, the key, the folder. Mason opened the bathroom door just as the front door burst inward. Light exploded through the room. My father's silhouette filled the doorway. His voice was calm, almost pitying. Son, he said, you don't know what you've done, but I did. I had opened a door that would never close again. We climbed out the window into the wet night, hearts pounding. Behind us, the motel's neon flickered violently, like the world itself was glitching under the weight of what it had just seen. As we ran toward the car, sirens wailed again, closer this time. Mason shouted over the rain, "The key, Eli! Protect the key!" And somewhere between the thunder and the flashing blue lights, Grandma's last words echoed in my head like a curse. The family proves mercy, not money. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever mercy was, my parents had run out of it a long time ago. We burst out of the motel's back alley into thick, humid darkness, the air vibrating with distant sirens. Mason kept one hand on my shoulder, the other gripping the car key so tight his knuckles turned white. The SUV roared to life, and we sped through empty streets like fugitives running from their own shadows. Not a word passed between us. Only the sound of the engine, the rain, and my heartbeat pounding in my ears like a drum calling something ancient awake. After 20 minutes, we reached the Del Rey branch, a glass-fronted bank sitting lonely in a business district that slept like the dead. Mason parked in the alley behind it, glancing at his watch. 4:42 a.m., he muttered. You've got 4 hours before the wire clears. We slipped inside through the employee entrance. Mason flashed something at the guard, a card or maybe a memory of power. The guard blinked, studied the brass key in my hand, and buzzed us through. The steel vault door stood open, yawning into darkness and cold. My fingers shook as I slotted the key into the tiny box lock. The mechanism clicked, clean, final. I slid the metal drawer out, heavy with the weight of buried truths. The scrape of metal against metal echoed like history clearing its throat. Inside the box was a small stack of papers, a micro SD card and an envelope sealed in wax stamped with an old insignia. Hawthorne Trust. The emblem was a stylized tree whose roots twisted into the shape of a heart. I broke the seal. The first page was a handwritten will dated 8 years ago, Grandma's name at the top, my name beneath it, Eli Bennett, designated successor guardian. The words blurred as I tried to process them. Guardian? Of what? Of who? The next document was a ledger. Line after line showed transfers from a real estate developer, Sunfield Group, to an LLC registered under my mother's name. The totals climbed into 6 figures. At the bottom, a note in Grandma's handwriting read, "If they choose money over me, the trust forfeits them. If you choose me over money, everything transfers to you." My throat went dry. Mason leaned closer, his face pale in the vault light. The Hawthorne Trust is my family's foundation, he said. It's been dormant for decades. My father built it to protect certain estates, including your grandmother's. The conditions were moral, not legal. It was meant to test character. I frowned. A test? You mean this was all planned? Not planned, he said quietly. Prepared for. The micro SD card caught my eye. On it, a simple label. Front door. I inserted it into Mason's tablet, my hands trembling. The screen lit up with grainy footage. The foyer of our house. My parents. My mother tearing the framed house deed from the wall. My father's voice cold as stone. She'll forget by Monday. Mom's laugh followed. If not, the new meds will help. I felt my chest cave in. That wasn't just manipulation. It was cruelty scripted like theater. Grandma's trust wasn't paranoia. It was survival. Mason scrolled further through the files. The timestamps, the ledger entries, the fake signatures, they formed a perfect map of betrayal. The same account number appeared again and again. The developer, my mother's LLC. A comfort care order signed at 3:02 p.m. that day, essentially authorizing sedation until natural decline. My voice cracked. They were going to snow her under medication until she forgot everything. Mason's jaw tightened. Until she faded away. I stared at the tablet, shaking. Why is my name even on this? Why would Grandma put me in a trust with your family's name? He hesitated, then said the sentence that shifted the ground beneath me. Because you're not who they told you are. I froze. What does that mean? Mason didn't answer. His gaze flicked toward the vault door. A faint ding echoed through the hall, the elevator. Someone else was coming down. The vault lights flickered. A uniformed deputy stepped through the threshold, hand resting on his holster. Eli Bennett? He asked. Hands where I can see them. Mason stepped between us, calm but deliberate. Officer, you're making a mistake. This boy's the victim, not the suspect. The deputy ignored him, pulling a folded printout from his belt. Emergency protective order, elder abuse. Filed by Mr. and Mrs. Bennett at 1:14 a.m. You've been accused of abducting your grandmother. My stomach dropped. That's impossible. She came with us. She asked me to save her. The deputy motioned for me to turn around. Cold metal cuffs bit into my wrists. Mason's voice hardened. Call Judge Ingram, he said. Night docket, Elder Protection Division. Tell her Mason Hawthorne requests ex parte review. And play this. He lifted the tablet, freezing the frame on my mother's smirk from the video. The deputy hesitated, confusion flickering across his face. Sir, I don't... Now, Mason barked. Unless you want to explain to a judge how you arrested the only witness holding proof of felony fraud. Still, Procedure 1. The deputy tightened the cuffs and started guiding me toward the exit. Mason followed, still talking, still too calm. My mind was spinning so fast I could barely breathe. Then, from behind us, a voice cut through the tension like glass snapping. Soft, quivering, familiar. Tell the judge, Grandma said from the vault doorway, leaning on her cane, eyes blazing with something between grief and fire. The truth about his birth certificate. The deputy froze mid-step. I turned. Mason went completely still. What? I whispered. Grandma took one shaky breath, her words like slow detonations. Eli, your last name isn't Bennett. It never was. My legs nearly gave out. Mason's eyes darkened, not with shock, but with recognition. He knew. He'd known all along. The deputy's radio crackled, a voice calling for confirmation. Mason turned to me, his expression unreadable. Do exactly what I say, he murmured. Don't speak until we reach the judge. Whatever happens next, remember, truth cuts both ways. As the vault door clanged shut behind us, one reality ended and another began. I wasn't just running from my parents anymore. I was running from the lie of my entire life. The courthouse felt like a morgue that couldn't decide which body to bury first. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering every few seconds as if the building itself disapproved of what was about to happen. It was 2:13 a.m., night court. The air smelled of coffee left too long on a burner, and the cold sweat of people who'd lied under oath before. I sat at the defendant's table, wrists free now but skin still raw from the cuffs. Mason stood beside me, his jaw set like carved stone. Across the room, my parents waited, perfectly composed, beautifully dressed, and utterly poisonous. Mom wore her church pearls, the ones she only used for funerals and manipulation. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue that had no tears on it. Dad pretended to look worried, scrolling through his phone screen reflection like it was a script he'd rehearsed.
Their lawyer, a man too slick for the hour, arranged papers like props.
When the judge entered, he rose with practiced grief. "Your Honor," he began, "this case is a tragedy. A young man, clearly unstable, has been manipulated by an outsider into abducting his grandmother." I wanted to shout, to show the footage, the ledgers, the truth burning in my chest. But Mason's hand brushed my arm, steady, commanding, telling me to wait. Then came the storm. Mason's team entered like a weather front, 2 associates and a paralegal dragging a duffel full of files. The sound of their printer echoed through the courtroom, spitting out exhibits like bullets. Within minutes, Mason's voice filled the room, precise, sharp, relentless. "Your Honor, Exhibit A," he said, pressing play on a tablet. The courtroom monitor flickered to life. There they were, my parents in our foyer, tearing down the deed, laughing about sedating Grandma. My mother's voice was almost sweet as she said, "She'll forget by Monday." The room turned to ice. You could feel the collective breath freeze midair. Even the judge stopped taking notes. "Exhibit B," Mason continued, unfazed. "Ledger entries tracing a series of payments from the developer's offshore accounts into an LLC registered under Mrs. Bennett's name." He turned to my parents' lawyer. "Would you like me to spell your client's maiden name, or will you stipulate?" The lawyer opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Mason wasn't done. "Exhibit C, the care home address provided to Adult Protective Services. A warehouse. No license, no staff, no residents. A shell." Judge Ingram, an older woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many lies, leaned back in her chair. "Mr. and Mrs. Bennett," she said slowly, "did you move your mother to a non-licensed facility?" Mom's voice went sugar-sweet. "We moved my mother to safety. Our son here has been unstable for years. We were protecting her from him." Lies. So calm, so deliberate, that for a moment I almost doubted myself. But then the clerk approached the bench carrying a thin-sealed envelope stamped "Confidential." The judge slid it open, reading in silence. The seconds stretched until I thought the clock itself had stopped ticking. Finally, she looked at me. Her gaze softened, then hardened again. "Mr. Bennett," she said, "your birth certificate was amended." She paused, letting the words settle like ashes. "Your biological mother is not the woman sitting at this table." The world went silent. Mom's breath hitched, a sharp intake of panic she tried to hide behind a trembling hand. Dad blinked fast, face draining of color. Mason didn't move. The judge continued, voice even and devastating. "Furthermore, according to this executed document," she tapped the will Mason had submitted, "your grandmother designated you as guardian of her person and property in the event of coercion or removal by any family member. In simpler terms, Mr. Bennett, the law now recognizes you as her legal protector." The words hit harder than any scream. Guardian. Me. The silence that followed was unbearable, thick as cement. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Mom's tissue fell from her hand. Dad's phone slipped from his grasp and shattered on the tile, spiderwebbing like the illusion of our family. Mason leaned in and whispered, "She protected you from them. And from me." I didn't understand that last part yet, but his voice carried a weight that made my stomach twist. The judge signed 3 orders in quick succession, each stroke of the pen a nail in the coffin of their deception. "The sale is frozen effective immediately," she said. "The protective order against the defendant is vacated. A new order is issued for Mrs. May Hawthorne against Mr. and Mrs. Bennett." Deputies turned toward my parents. The transformation on their faces was something I will never forget. Shock, disbelief, then a kind of primal horror that made them look suddenly small. Mom broke first. "You can't do this," she said, voice cracking. "He's lying. That video was edited." The judge didn't even look up. "Save it for sentencing." A deputy placed a gentle but firm hand on Dad's shoulder. For once, he didn't fight. He just stared at me, cold, empty, like a stranger realizing his mask had finally melted. As the gavel came down, the sound cracked through the courtroom like thunder. Justice, messy and late, had finally arrived. Then something unexpected happened. One of the bailiffs stepped forward and handed Mason a folded note. His confident expression faltered for the first time all night. He unfolded it slowly, scanned the contents, then looked at me with eyes that weren't just shocked, they were haunted. He passed it across the table. The handwriting was unfamiliar, elegant, almost trembling. Just 5 words, Suite 1907, sunrise, bring him. I stared at the note, heart hammering. Bring who? Mason's lips parted, but no sound came out. When he finally spoke, it was barely more than a whisper. You're real, Father. The courtroom seemed to tilt. For a moment, I thought I might collapse under the weight of everything unraveling. As the deputies escorted my parents out and the judge disappeared through her chamber door, I sat there frozen, half in one life, half in another. The truth was no longer a question. It was a weapon, and by sunrise I was going to find out who loaded it. Dawn crept into the city like a secret it couldn't hold any longer. The sky above the glass towers bled from navy to gold, brushing light over streets that still carried the memory of the night's chaos. I stood in front of Suite 1907, heart pounding, holding a letter that had rewritten my entire life. Behind me, Mason's footsteps echoed steadily, each one heavier than the last. Grandma sat in her wheelchair near the window, wrapped in a knitted blanket, the morning glow turning her silver hair to fire. Mason didn't speak as he stared out at the skyline. His reflection in the glass looked older than he was, haunted, uncertain. He'll be here, he murmured, more to himself than to me. I didn't ask who he was. Deep down, I already knew. The door clicked, opened. A man stepped in, tall, composed, dressed in a dark suit that whispered power. His hair was silver at the edges, his eyes deep and unreadable. He didn't look at me first. He looked at Grandma. The air between them was thick with decades of words unsaid. I waited too long, he said softly. You told me never to come back. I listened. I was a coward. Grandma's voice was fragile but sharp. You were a married coward. He nodded once, guilt carving lines deeper into his face. Then he turned to me. I'm Thomas Hawthorne, he said. Mason's father. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Thomas Hawthorne, founder of the trust, the man behind the name that had haunted every page of Grandma's papers, the man whose shadow stretched across generations. My mind raced to the photograph in Mason's folder, the young boy Grandma once saved, the man she once loved. Everything was connecting, painfully, inevitably. Thomas took a slow breath. I loved your mother, he said, voice low, trembling under its own control. My brother loved her more. He married her. She got pregnant. With you. I signed a check to make it disappear. Your grandmother tore it up and told me, we don't throw away children in this house. She told me to leave and never claim what wasn't mine. He paused, his eyes glistening under the pale morning light. But when my brother died, your mother came to me. Scared, broke. She begged me to fix everything. I built the Hawthorne Trust to protect your grandmother and you, and I watched your parents circle it like vultures for 20 years. Grandma's hand found mine, her skin papery but strong. We tried to keep you clean, she whispered. Away from their greed. Away from his guilt. Mason finally spoke, voice calm but sharp. Dad built the test. I enforced it. They failed. He didn't. Thomas looked at me with something between pride and regret. He pulled a thick envelope from his coat and placed it on the table between us. Your grandmother wanted this to reach you today. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside were 3 documents. A full transfer of the house, free and clear, including mineral rights hidden in a buried clause. A 1% equity certificate in Hawthorne Systems dated 2004, signed by Thomas and co-assigned by E. May. And a handwritten letter in Grandma's looping script. If you chose me over money, you've already earned both. Forgive me for the secrets. I was buying you a life. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. For a moment, no one spoke. The city outside hummed awake. Horns, footsteps, the sound of people rushing toward new beginnings. Inside the suite, time had stopped. Then, chaos shattered it again. The door burst open. My parents stormed in with a marshal and their lawyer, faces twisted with fury and panic. "This is fraud!" Mom shouted. "You forged those papers! None of this is legal!" Before she could take another step, a second marshal entered behind them, holding a thick packet. "Judge Ingraham's injunction," he said, his voice firm. "Effective immediately." The lawyer's protest died on his tongue as he read the first page. The deputies turned toward my father. In slow motion, I watched realization flood his face, the collapse of every lie, every scheme. They cuffed him quietly, no struggle, just the sound of chains brushing against silk. Mom stood frozen, her eyes wild, her hands shaking. Thomas faced her with a kind of quiet devastation. "You sold the wrong thing," he said. "You sold the roof while he still owned the sky." Mom's last words came out like poison. "He's not yours. He's nobody's." Grandma's voice broke the silence like a prayer. "He's mine," she said softly, "because I showed up when it hurt." The room fell still. The city outside roared with life, but in here, everything was ending. And beginning. What happened after felt like a dream you don't realize you survived until days later. The sale collapsed. The developer turned on my parents, handing over every document to the district attorney. Charges followed: fraud, forgery, elder exploitation. They'd spent a lifetime building lies. Now, the truth was collecting interest. Thomas restructured the trust, naming me as successor under one condition: build something that shelters more than just you. Mason stayed, his loyalty quiet but unwavering. Grandma, fragile yet victorious, moved back into her home, the one that had weathered every storm our family had ever unleashed. 3 weeks later, in a quiet hospice room that smelled faintly of lilacs, Grandma pressed her ring into my hand. "I failed in some ways," she whispered, her breath thin as paper. "But not this one." Her fingers squeezed mine once, and then she was gone, leaving behind warmth, silence, and a promise I didn't yet know how to keep. The first winter, storm hit as we opened May House, the legal clinic and shelter we built in her name. It stood on the same land she'd once fought to keep, now a beacon for families trapped in the same kind of greed that had almost destroyed us. Reporters gathered outside for the ribbon cutting. Cameras flashed. Mason stood beside me, his tie crooked, eyes wet. "She wrote me one line on a napkin," he said quietly. "When you escape, help someone who can't." I owed her everything. I asked what he'd tell the cameras. He looked at the crowd, women holding their kids, men who'd finally stopped flinching at the sound of anger, and smiled. "The truth," he said. "Money didn't save anyone here, showing up did." He looked at me then, his voice steady but breaking at the edges. "Your parents sold a home," he said. "Your grandmother bought you a future. And when the wind rose carrying her name across the city, I finally understood. Some inheritances aren't built on money. They're built on mercy,